Welcome back to SnowRunner, guys, and today we're going to be on console on Xbox Series X, and we're going to be trying to push some limits of what console mods are capable of in terms of what we can run all at once, and in terms of what we can haul, and in terms of what kind of maps we can load, and in the process of doing that, we're going to have a fun adventure as well. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the video, and make sure you stay tuned. Also, something you can do if you're having issues activating more than one of these mods on your console is to uninstall some other games on your hard drive and free up some space. It doesn't work for everybody, but it is a potential, not necessarily workaround or fix, but potentially a way to kind of squeeze a little bit more RAM out of your system. It doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work for everybody, but once again, there have been some people that have had some success with that, especially on systems where the hard drive is almost completely filled up. Now, since you guys have seen me build these vehicles in a variety of different ways and quite a few different times, I decided to go ahead and speed up the build process, and then of course normal game playback speed will resume once we get to the actual driving. Now, the first vehicle I wanted to build was the R&R 3500, the second vehicle I built was the WJ, and the third vehicle I built was the Warrior, aka the Gladiator. Now, one of the biggest things that I want to make sure I mention multiple times throughout this video is the fact that, yes, this is all running on consoles. However, I did have an issue loading up the map with this many mods enabled the first time I tried to do it. The second time I tried to do it, I had a little bit better luck and it loaded right in, but the first time I ended up trying to load into this map, it just loaded and loaded and loaded for about 15 minutes, and eventually what I had to do was quit out of the game completely and restart the game and try to load the map again, and then it worked just fine. Now, one of the biggest things I wanted to also talk about is some of the ways that you can also try to work around the RAM limitation issues. Now, one thing that I do have to mention, though, is that the RAM limit is different depending on what your system is. Like, say, for example, Xbox One Original, Xbox One X, or Xbox One S, or Xbox Series X. There's all sorts of different RAM limits depending on what console you are on. Now, the other thing that I talked about in the beginning of this video was potentially deleting other games on your hard drive, and that can work, but it will only do so much. So if you, say for example, uninstall a bunch of other games on your hard drive and you still are having RAM limit issues, you may have found the actual limit of your console. Now, one of the other things that I really wanted to mention is the fact that these vehicles have all gotten various updates and improvements in terms of the customization. For example, the R&R 3500 now has the ability to use weighted bumpers, which is a huge plus for anyone that wants to use it as a dedicated towing vehicle, whether you're hauling in-game cargo or your own vehicles. Now, one of the biggest things that I suggest you do with these vehicles is try to enable one at a time, and if, for example, they don't want to enable at all, or if you're having trouble enabling maybe two, what I do recommend doing is doing a full clean out, a complete clean out of all of the mods on your system, and then going back through and re-downloading and reinstalling each one of these mods one by one. Now, of course, TNB Trails, it goes without saying, is an absolutely incredible map, although it is huge and can lag some older systems, so do bear that in mind if you are trying to replicate this adventure. Now, the biggest thing about this video was the fact that we were able to have the second gen, the WJ, and the Gladiator all enabled at the same time. And the way I was able to do that was I had to disable my IX Heavy Wrecker. Now, with the IX Heavy Wrecker turned on, I can only have two R&R mods enabled. However, with the IX Wrecker turned off, I can have all three of them plus Red's Top Truck Challenge Bronco enabled at the same time as well. So that really does show how much RAM the IX 3880 Heavy Wrecker uses, and if you are using the Heavy Wrecker and you can't really enable anything else, I do recommend turning it off, at least temporarily, to enable the other mods that you are trying to use. And I think a lot of people are concerned with the Heavy Wrecker that they are either going to lose it if they turn it off, or maybe it'll get an update and they won't be able to re-download it again for a long time, and I completely understand that fear because it's a real fear after the 3500 was gone for so long, and some people ended up uninstalling it before it left, and then it left for an update, and they weren't able to re-download it and re-enable it until very recently. Now, granted, if you choose to not uninstall a mod, it will always stay on your system. For example, my console still has the monstrosity on it, which was removed a while back due to some branding concerns. Now, one of the other things to keep in mind is that whenever you go to clean out your mods, always make sure that any mods that you want to keep are the last ones that you actually uninstall or disable. Now, that's kind of outside the realm of doing just a full clean out, which is an option. You can do a full clean out. You just have to make sure that you're willing to part ways with just about anything and everything that's on your hard drive. However, if you're trying to get these mods to run better, that is potentially one of the best ways to do it. Now, you may have to, like I said before, you may have to sacrifice some older mods in order to run some of the newer ones, and that is just kind of a reality when working within a space-based and RAM-based limitation for mods. And also, I'm super happy to finally have Beans on the dash of the 3500. It's so freaking cool to be able to have him on the dash of the 3500 because I've driven it so much. I've driven it in so many different scenarios on so many different maps, and the ability to just have him right there, especially on consoles, is so cool to me. And also, I wanted to make sure I did a little bit of a turning radius test with that gooseneck actually loaded down and the truck's packed, and it actually did really, really well. Now, one of the things I do have to mention is the truck does drive really well with the trailer once it has that weighted bumper put on. I definitely recommend running the weighted bumper if you are going to be doing any sort of heavy towing. Although, as you will see in just a moment, once we actually get up the hill and make the left turn to go down the hill on the main road, the weight does become a little bit of an issue in terms of stopping, and you really do need to be on your game 100% of the time. Otherwise, the trailer will actually run you directly off the road, and the weighted bumper only adds more weight to the equation and therefore makes you an even better subject for gravity to get its hands on and just send down a hill. Now, at this point in the video, of course, I want you guys to let me know any thoughts and feedback that you guys have in the comment section down below. I would absolutely love to know what your experiences has been with any and all of these vehicles or even this map. Now, we'll get back to that in a second, but this is when I tried to slow down, didn't happen, and I ended up on my top with the trailer on top of me. Now, fast forward through a little bit of reloading, a little bit of recovery, and a little bit of all over the placeness, and we are back on the road and back on the move. Now, the cool thing about running that weighted bumper as well is that once you have some weight on the trailer, the truck sits basically perfectly level, which is actually really realistic. I mean, a properly set up tow rig will sit a little bit, like, kind of look a little bit front heavy or a little bit rear high, and then once you have it loaded, once you have a trailer behind it, it levels out super nicely and actually in some cases can drive better than it did before. Now, this also really helps with climbing hills with weight on the trailer, because before, if you tried to climb hills with this truck with a trailer weighted down like we have this one, it would just pull the front axle off the ground and just want to wheelie everywhere, and you would lose all steering, and then stuff would just kind of turn into one crappy situation after another until you ended up in a ditch. And luckily, we don't really have to deal with ditch shenanigans really much at all now, thanks again to that weighted bumper. Now, as we get a little bit further on down the road, our objective becomes a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more clear the further along we go. Now, we are actually on our way to the rock bridge, which is directly next to the main highway bridge that you guys see ahead. Now, this rock bridge is difficult and challenging no matter what direction you're going. You can go from this direction or from the other direction, and it's always a challenge for any rig that attempts it. Now, some rigs are obviously going to do it better than others, but it really is a great challenge for any and all rigs that attempt this particular obstacle. Now, let's see if we can do it in the WJ. Now, the WJ is definitely at a little bit of an advantage here because over the Gladiator, it has a shorter wheelbase, and it definitely also has a little bit better ability to sort of place itself on an obstacle, a little bit better ability to place its wheels on an obstacle, and because of, once again, that shorter wheelbase, you can really pick your lines very, very carefully. Now, right off the bat, it's got wonderful grip with these KM3s, goes right up the rock bridge, and you can actually see how gorgeous the view is from up here, and this map always impresses me with its gorgeous vistas and its gorgeous views, and even though this is on console, it still looks very, very good. Now, the rock textures may not be quite up to the same level that they are on PC, because these rocks are actually 4K textures on PC, but we got just a little bit ahead of ourselves here, and then I didn't get it into reverse fast enough and ended up tumbling off the side, and you actually stay in the air for a long time here until you plummet into the water and end up under the water, and your engine would basically be hydrolocked at that point. So when I was going to make my attempt in the Gladiator, tensions were definitely a little bit on the higher side. But when you're doing obstacles like this, you definitely do have to remain relaxed, because if you get all tense and you get worried, it's just not going to go well for you. There's just no way it's going to go well for you if you tense up and get worried, really at any point when you're off-roading, because then you're basically liable to put yourself in a even worse situation than you did before. Now, I'll admit I made a big mistake right here, and I ended up driving into a hole that I thought was not there. I genuinely thought that there was going to be more rock face to catch my tires when I drove off of that little ledge, but luckily I had the Dodge to winch to, and we were all good, we were all okay. So, slight mistake on my part, but we're gonna go ahead and get this big old bus of a Jeep up onto the rock bridge. Now, you definitely notice the longer wheelbase straight away, and there's always advantages and disadvantages to running a longer wheelbase off-road. One of the advantages is that you have a little bit more stability, but one of the disadvantages is that you're more likely to high center. So I made sure to approach these obstacles slowly and yet very, very carefully, picking my lines in a much more careful manner than I did in the WJ. The WJ, I just sort of pointed it at the terrain and went, whereas with this, I didn't want it to end up in the same place as the WJ, i.e. at the bottom of the ravine. So when you're not wanting to end up at the bottom of a ravine, you definitely tend to be a little bit more careful, go a little bit slower, and spend a little bit more time focusing on line choice. Now, I will say though here, the Gladiator actually showed a really, really good point, or a really, really good ability there of a longer wheelbase vehicle, and that is the fact that it can just inch that front axle up over the top of an obstacle just a little bit easier without wanting to roll over backwards on you, even if the obstacle is very steep. Same here, we're able to keep all of our tires on the rock surface at the same time and not get into any hairy situations with tipping or the vehicle actually coming off the ground. Now, this next section kind of scared me a little bit because from the top here, it looks almost straight down, but I decided to go with an approach, a realistic approach of coming up to the ledge very, very, very slowly, and then as I inched over the edge, I put it one gear higher and then eased into the power and flowed off of the rock. Now, you do have to actually ease into the power a little bit when you're coming off of those ledges, because if you're too much on the brakes, then you actually have a chance of tipping forward rather than backwards. Now, at this point, you might be ready to celebrate, but you can't really get all too comfortable yet because there are plenty of opportunities still to flip over. And believe me, I took one of those opportunities, but not until after I had made it across the rock bridge. You guys will see in just a moment. But as we made it down to the bottom here, I figured, I was like, you know what? We're going really, really far. We're doing really, really well. I just gotta make sure that I don't let myself flip over. And we almost flipped over right there, but we ended up making it all the way to the dirt trail, which I was really, really happy about. And then when I tried to turn around, as you'll see momentarily, that's where the rollover business started to occur. So with that all being said, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I hope you also did enjoy this console stress test. If you did enjoy it, let me know any thoughts and opinions you may have in the comments down below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future updates in regards to console mods or SnowRunner phases or really anything else SnowRunner and off-road gaming related. And I will see you guys in the next one. Talk to y'all later.